I didn't think that the whole Trump trying to blame all sorts of random people for the horrific tragedy at Reagan National Airport story could get worse, but it did. And I want to show you, as a little bit of relief, some folks putting Trump in his place and even saying some things to his face. But first, for context, as I'm sure you've all seen what we talked about already today, there was a devastating crash, what's shaping up to be the worst plane crash since 9/11 in the United States, that has left dozens. They're still recovering people's bodies, but dozens of people dead, families devastated. And it was a crash between a commercial plane and a military helicopter as the plane came into Reagan Airport. Just absolutely heartbreaking. And I've said it before with tragedies, but I'm somehow still shocked by the willingness of people, Trump in particular, to not just politicize, but dishonestly politicize tragedies. So number one, you're willing right after something like this, as people are grieving, to jump into action with a political point. But in certain cases, a political point could just overlap with an accountability point, or a point about what we need to derive in terms of insights so that we could prevent future things. But to then distort completely, fabricate completely the truth so that you can levy a political attack is horrific, given the lives that have been lost and the subject matter of what we're talking about. So before getting to that point being made to Trump, here is him pulling another stunt, signing an executive order or something, a memo of some kind, that essentially seeks to blame, in the immediate aftermath of this tragedy, on Biden, Pete Buttigieg, and DEI. It's very much not even accurate. I'll remind you of that in a little bit. And of course, because he's doing this, people are going to bring up the very reasonable and legitimate concerns around his gutting since he got into power of different institutions and how that could have contributed. But I'm even weary, as I said earlier, to do it just because it's just such an icky conversation we're having to have because of what he's throwing into it. But I guess we do. But here's him signing this document. While you watch, please do, if you appreciate the show, click the subscribe button.
Sir, thank you.
Second, for your signature, we have a presidential memorandum titled Immediate Assessment of Aviation Safety. In light of the damage done to aviation safety by the Biden administration's DEI and woke policies, what this presidential memorandum orders is for your Secretary of Transportation and FAA administrator, in this case acting FAA administrator, to basically ensure that we are actively undoing all of that damage, that we are assessing how much damage was done, and that we're ensuring that people hired within the FAA, in keeping with your memorandum of January 21st, are only the most outstanding, capable people for the jobs that they're being hired into.
In other words, competence.
Yes, sir.
So again, I guess this is coming from Trump's insecurity, that people were talking about this, Mediaite saying local columnists blame Trump for future crashes just hours before helicopter airliner collision, saying, as we reviewed, an FAA employee I know confirms agency already lacks sufficient air traffic controllers. The so-called buyouts and the other attacks on federal employees won't help, talking about the Trump administration. Remember that fact when the flight delays and potentially crashes commence and Trumpsters start falsely blaming DEI or Biden. I mean, he predicted it before. It's just horrible. And headlines like this: Trump guts key aviation safety committee, fires heads of TSA, Coast Guard. It goes on. But I guess that being headlines from before caused Trump to think, well, I need to then jump into action because people are going to blame me and I got to throw it at DEI. And that's where we get to the responses. He mentioned by name Pete Buttigieg during his press conference today. Pete Buttigieg responded, saying, despicable as families grieve, Trump should be leading, not lying. We put safety first, drove down close calls, grew air traffic control, and had zero commercial airline crash fatalities out of millions of flights on our watch. President Trump now oversees the military and the FAA. One of his first acts was to fire and suspend some of the key personnel who helped keep our skies safe. Time for the president to show actual leadership and explain what he will do to prevent this from happening again. And then Caitlin Collins said to his face what he needs to hear.
Even yet know the names of the 67 people who were killed, and you are blaming Democrats and DEI policies and air traffic control and seemingly the member of the U.S. military who was flying that Black Hawk helicopter. Don't you think you're getting ahead of the investigation right now?
No, I don't think so at all. I don't think with the names of the people, you mean the names of the people that are on the plane? You think that's going to make a difference?
Does it comfort their families
They
to
are
hear you
a
blaming
group of
DEI
people that have
policies?
lost their lives. If you want a list of the names, we can give you that. We'll be giving that very soon. We're in coordination with American Airlines. We're in coordination very strongly, obviously, with the military. But I think that's not a very smart question.
But are you
I'm
blaming-
surprised coming from
Are
you.
you blaming
He insults the intelligence of the reporter who dared to say, before we even know the names of the people who have died, you're baselessly blaming DEI and the past administration for something that, from initial reports, if we had to play the blame game, it wouldn't shine a great light on you, Trump. But you're the one insisting on doing that. And so good for Caitlin Collins for bringing that up. Again, we don't yet know the names of the 67 people who were killed, and you're blaming Democrats and DEI policies, Caitlin Collins said. But then he just went, what about the names would change? It's just so callous. You then have an aviation expert on CNN saying this is deranged.
Are DEI policies at the FAA to blame?
I put my head in my hands, Pam, when the president said that. This is something that has been pushed by the far right for a few months now, that DEI policies are to blame in a degradation of safety in aviation in the United States. But frankly, the president is getting out ahead of his skis here. What he has said is not only unprofessional, unpresidential, inconsiderate of the status of this investigation, but frankly, it is just unhinged. That he could even say with any sort of certainty that diversity, equity, and inclusion policies had any part to play in this accident. Remember that 67 people are dead. I hate to get so upset here, but this is something that investigators will really need to pick apart.
Yeah, of course. How is that something you have to remind the president of the United States about? He was asked, will this make him reconsider the complete assault on the federal workforce, trying to gut it completely so he can fill it with just unqualified loyalists? And he said no.
Over 2 million federal workers the option to resign immediately. There are 50,000 FAA employees. Does this tragedy give you reason to reconsider that option of resignations because of concerns about staffing issues on airline safety?
If people aren't coming to work, if they're not going to come into the office and report as per the date that you know what it is, everybody knows what the date is.
So you get the point. Nope. No reconsidering going on. You have Hakeem Jeffries, the Democratic House Minority Leader, responding.
This is a tragedy that occurred above DCA Airport. Lives have been lost. Families have been devastated. People are suffering. And the leader of this country decides to go out and peddle lies, conspiracy theories, and attack people of color and women without any basis whatsoever. Have you no decency? Have you no respect for the families whose lives have been turned upside down?
Right. And it's not what the focus should be. I'm honestly asking, though, what do we do? What do we do when Trump goes out there and spews these lies, other than you got to correct them? But this is not where our collective conscience needs to be. But Trump forces us there. Forces points being made from Aaron Rupar like this. All I know is that had President Biden forced out the FAA chair under pressure from his top advisor and his corrupt motives, and then the next week there was a plane crash that killed more than 60 people, Republicans would be howling that it was an impeachable offense. Of course they would. We saw how they reacted to the wildfires, to Maui, to hurricanes, to East Palestine. And then there's so much hypocrisy even in that standard. Micah Irfan said, truly remarkable stuff. Democrats just got scolded for calling out Trump's gutting of aviation safety in the wake of the crash yesterday. Now Trump himself is blaming Democrats for the crisis happening under his watch. Double standards, always. And that's absolutely correct. One moment I didn't get to from the press conference was Trump seeming to just sort of spitball and brainstorm and throw out random thoughts, sort of free-flowing journal.
But we had a situation where you had a helicopter that had the ability to stop. I have helicopters. You can stop a helicopter very quickly. It had the ability to go up or down. It had the ability to turn. And the turn it made was not the correct turn, obviously.
Why are you doing that? What is that for? Who is that for? And by the way, we are seeing Republicans, it's not just Trump, Republicans echo this.
Is there any reason to believe there was any foul play here?
Well, at this time, you hate to jump to any conclusions. Obviously, we'll look at everything, check all the boxes. I had just taken off from D.C. Before the crash, and of course, it came across my cell phone, and I saw it and was horrified. So prayers go out to all those impacted. But, to your point, I think you have to look at this with eyes wide open, see what happened. Human error, was it some sort of equipment failure? Did DEI play a role in this type of thing? So I think you look at it, you go into it with, again, eyes wide open and make sure that something like this never happens. It's been a number of years since we've had.
They just throw it out. It's the same. DEI, if you missed stuff recently, diversity, equity, and inclusion is what it stands for. And it's just their catch-all for, did they force too many black people to be pilots? Did they force too many gays, too many lesbians? And is that causing the problem? DEI with the wildfires because the fire chief dares to be lesbian. And they never really give much thought to it. They just throw it out. And so then when something happens, and this is such a dark thing we have to say, but just to prove this is not what they really feel, when something happens and the only people involved are white dudes, they still blame Democrats. Okay, so it's not even consistent regardless of how gross it is. And they don't wait for any evidence to come out, but they're saying, I think that the airlines were hiring unqualified black, and we heard a right-winger say, if the pilot's black, I'm scared, Charlie Kirk, or I'm uncomfortable because I think he was put in there, or she, for being black and not qualified, or if it's a woman, or anyway. So that's what they mean by that. And it's proof that they're really not engaging thoughtfully or responsibly with the subject, especially as they're the ones in power now. And they're the ones gutting safety institution. That's them. So it's now their show here. And it's never been reasonable, but it's now especially unreasonable to blindly blame the other side as compared to just waiting for the facts to come out and then thoughtfully with a heavy heart and with a responsible mindset, given the magnitude of the topic, assessing what could have been done better and what criticism is necessary, if any. That's how a normal person acts, but too many right now really do prioritize political attacks over people. Let me know your thoughts in the comments.